Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the fifth and final game of the 2018 Hearthstone World Championship Tour. I'm PenguinZA, joined by Dib for this fifth and final game with two powerhouse players.
Yeah, we've got Antrizi here. He really made a breakout in the 2018 Summer Championships, beating our world champion Tom 60229, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can keep that momentum going and cause another upset here as he's taking on Azumo.
Yeah, Azuma is one of those old school powerhouse players. I mean, he's coming in with huge form as well, having 9 tournament wins, as well as being the top point earner in North America. So really looking strong and probably a crowd favorite going into this game. The fifth and final game is going to be between Antrizi's Murloc Paladin and Azumo's Zulu Warlock. How do you feel this matchup's going to fare, though?
Well, this is a very board-centric matchup. Usually it favors the Paladin a bit these days because of the power of Call to Arms. It's difficult for the Zoo to actually get ahead enough on board that it can still be in a good position after the Call to Arms. So very often it can come down to who's able to just make those efficient trades on board, and it's going to be very dependent on the early turns, I think. But without any real delay, we're going to be able to jump into this game now.
Yeah, the fifth and final game here between Azuma and Antrizi. We've got Azuma on the top with the Zoo Warlock and Antrizi on the bottom of your screens with the Murloc Paladin. And a pretty strong start here for Antrizi. I mean, that Murloc Tidecaller, pretty strong, as well as being with the coin means you can coin at that Call of Arms a little bit earlier.
Yeah, he's got coin Call to Arms into Call to Arms. You know, we are talking about how powerful that card is in this matchup, and it's a really good start for him. Azumo here has a pretty good start as well. Cobalt Librarian contests most of the one-drops that Antrizi could play. And then he has the Volga Homunculus, which is actually just really efficiently statted. And the damage that you're taking from Volga Homunculus is not much of a downside in the early turns here, where it's really about fighting for the board. The Grimscale Chum here is a pretty good pickup because it's going to allow him to protect his Murloc Tidecaller, which is a more valuable minion to him. You know, he just throws out this Chum to trade with the Cobalt Librarian instead.
Yeah, this Volga Homunculus coming down, though, can pretty much contest a lot of the Murloc Paladin's 2-drops as well. But here, Antrizi could just decide to play this Murloc Tidecaller, which I feel is a little bit inefficient. But he's going to choose to coin out the Raining Blade and preemptively actually strike into this Volga Homunculus, reducing it down to 1, so that pretty much any minion of his is going to be able to contest it.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice from him. I mean, this kind of prevents him from going for that coin Call to Arms game plan that we talked about, so he's kind of slowing down his future board. And Azumo picks up this Glacial Shard here, a really good way to keep his Volga Homunculus protected and leave him in a pretty good position. Now, Antrizi, though, with the Grimscale Chum pickup, that's going to allow him to have a really powerful Tidecaller. Either he can have the 3/3 Tidecaller, or he can just go for the 3/4 Tidecaller. So I mean, it makes a lot of sense for him to just play the Grimscale Chum first here, as he just gets more health on his minions, which is a very important factor in a matchup like this.
Yeah, and contest this board so well here of Azuma, having to push both minions in. Oh, but that Blood Fury potion being picked up now could change this around completely. This Volga Homunculus is still going to be sticking around from turn 4. And he's even going to use the Soulfire and getting rid of one of his Spellbreakers to help him with this. And this Volga Homunculus still doing a ton of work a couple of turns later.
Yeah, Soulfire, a really important tempo tool for the Zoo. It's one of their best ways to try and get ahead on the board. But the big problem for Azuma here is he only has the 1 minion up against Antrizi's Call to Arms turn. And now Antrizi's able to set up so any of his minions will trade into this Volga Homunculus. And Azuma would really need an additional buff, which we can see he has with that Demon Fire. He also has the Void Walker in his hand, which can help protect any of his other minions. The Despicable Dreadlord is also pretty powerful. But unfortunately, the Murlocs here tend to have a lot more health than the Despicable Dreadlord can cleanly deal with. So he's going to instead go for the Spellbreaker, so he doesn't have to trade into the Righteous Protector, and then just use the Void Walker here to protect that Spellbreaker a bit.
Yeah, and Treasy doesn't have too many Murlocs on board, so I mean this top deck of the Gentle Megasaur not going to be as strong here, but this Call to Arms and getting Knife Juggler out first is so important. Unfortunately, both Valve and Inquisitors coming out from the deck, no Battle Cries, which means no additional Murlocs going to be coming off from the hero power, but still a pretty strong turn, especially with that Knife Juggler now out on board, which can do quite a bit of damage, especially with the kind of deck that Antreezy's running.
Yeah, and then for Antrizi here, it's just really a case of It's important for him to get a lot more Murlocs on the board so that his Gentle Megasaur is good next turn. So I don't think he's going to be too worried. The Varfen Inquisitor does still have 3 health, which means it survives a bit better than, if you're pulling stuff like Grimscale Chums, although he's already played both of those. So Azumo here with the Crystal Weaver pickup, this is going to allow him to more cleanly trade into that Knife Juggler, and with the Demon Fire, it's even going to allow him to keep his Voidwalker alive, or he can use it here to make sure he clears off 2 minions, which I really like. This allows him to, instead of having a 4-2 there, he actually clears off the minions proactively, which helps him to play around any buffs or anything like that Divine Shield on the Purifiers more.
Yeah, that Crystal Weaver is such a strong card, just allowing him to get a little bit more board control on this side. But Antrizi now picking up that Purifiers Maul, the Unidentified Maul, changing into Purifiers, doesn't help him too much here, considering that he doesn't really have many minions, and I'm pretty sure he would want to get as much value out of that as possible. So he could possibly go with the Hydrologist plus the Purifiers Maul to help him a little bit here. I mean, he could also just consider going with the Gentle Megasaur, but going to go with the Hydrologist here. And do you feel that you go with the Gentle Megasaur thereafter?
I like the Hydrologist first. It can give him a better choice based on the secrets that he gets. I think if he got Noble Sacrifice here, the Purifiers Maul would have been especially good, because he could have used the Murloc to kill the 4-1, and then the Noble Sac would have sort of set up to kill the Crystal Weaver, and I think that's what he's kind of threatening here with this. He's trying to make it look like he has that Noble Sacrifice. We can see though that it's actually the eye for an eye, which ultimately is not going to be that powerful here, as Azumo has a massive health lead on Antrizi here. So Azumo not really falling for the bait and going face with that Crystal Weaver now. Azumo just needs 1 more damage to stick on board, and that Doom Guard will be lethal for him. I think, yeah, just going to go with the Despicable Dreadlord here. That should give him a pretty strong board where, if Antrizi takes 1 more damage here, Azumo's going to have that lethal.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Doom Guard will be discarding cards, so which means that Blood Fury Potion that is in the hand isn't going to be able to be played onto that Doom Guard. However, Azumo now with the Discover here, or the Adapt at least, and Poisonous and plus Attack here, I kind of feel that Attack is a little bit more important here.
Yeah, so either Poisonous or plus Attack allow him to trade off on the board to kill the minions, which he has to be a little bit worried at 6 health. There's no single card that Azumo could play that would kill him. It would have to be a combination of 2 cards, and one of those would probably need to be Doom Guards or Soulfire. So that makes it pretty difficult to combine any 2 cards because of the nature of those cards discarding cards. So for Antrizi here, I think just going with the plus attack is a little bit better, because it also happens to buff his Murloc War Leader that's on the board, which is going to allow him to threaten back for lethal. But he's going to go with the Poisonous, maybe fearing a really big minion coming down. And it looks like he's going to use his weapon to kill the Crystal Weaver as well, leaving himself on 1. Now this leaves him open to so much more damage from hand from Azumo, and we're going to see Azumo does have this Doom Guard for lethal now. So, Antrizi there trying to maybe play to win by going a little bit, trying to keep more minions on the board, but ultimately he would have threatened close to lethal. He would have had 11 plus 2 from the weapon. So it would have still been 2 more turns for him to actually have lethal there, but I think ultimately he needed to play around the little bit of damage from hand, and going to 1 is a little bit too risky against the Warlock. He still would have had a strong board, and as long as he could avoid burst into burst, he could have still managed to win that game. But it is going to be Azumo that takes that there.
Yeah, I think Antrizi also possibly just used these weapons a little bit too aggressively, also preemptively just taking a little bit of extra damage going into the minions. For example, that Vulgar Homunculus as well as that Crystal Weaver are just 2 times where, taking excessive damage just from those weapons is pretty damaging to you, especially as the Paladin, especially the Murloc Paladin, where you don't generally have any sort of heal in your deck. So taking possibly just a little bit of extra damage where he maybe didn't need to, and possibly even that Adapt if he didn't take, say, an additional 5 damage from the Crystal Weaver, could have allowed him to actually survive, if not actually clutch it. But nevertheless, Azumo is going to clutch this win, is going to be our first grand finalist, and we'll be having a short break before we come and see who our next grand finalist is going to be.